everybody, what's going on? Hellknight here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday, the patch notes for patch 9.8 have been posted, which means it's time for another patch note rundown. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in this week's patch and letting you guys know what you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. Now, first and foremost, 9.8 is going to be the MSI 2019 patch, which means that there are a bunch of changes aimed at champions that we've been seeing a lot of recently in the patch notes and which could theoretically see play at this big tournament. We've also got a couple of other smaller changes to some long languishing champions that need it and some other adjustments. Finally, there are a bunch of changes from the recent ARAM experiment that will be sticking around and some that will not. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into things. First and foremost, by talking about Amumu. He's been on the weaker end for quite a long period of time. He got some minor buffs on this patch. Bandage Toss's cooldown down at earlier ranks is going to be really solid because it's going to give him more initiation without having to max that first. And then the bonus true damage on Curse to Touch got buffed up even further. So Mumu's actually going to be doing quite a bit of damage. I don't know that it's still going to be enough to make him a viable pick. He's just too blue buff reliant. He's too mana reliant, but it does help him out, especially when he can get to those late game points of the game. So if you're playing Amumu, essentially consider him to be another scaling character alongside someone like Vayne or Kayle. You just want to hit the late game because you just kind of shred a lot of people. Camille's getting a very minor buff. Don't need to talk about it too much, but she is going to be slightly stronger. Cassiopeia's E mana cost has been decreased at later ranks, which Riot are doing because the increase on the mana cost on her other abilities have really hurt her ability to fight in the mid-game skirmishes that are kind of happening right now. So reducing the E mana cost means that she will still be able to fight so long as she is E-max Cassiopeia, which is a more aggressive playstyle, but a more risky playstyle. So I think it works. I think this is a fine place to buff Cassiopeia, and I do think she had room for buffs after her previous nerfs really took her down a couple of pegs. Gnar is getting actually a fairly big buff here. His ultimate's cooldown has been reduced by 30 seconds at rank 1. Goes down to a 50-second total reduction at max rank. That's absolutely huge. That means that Gnar will pretty much be throwing you against a wall just whenever he goes mega. There's no other way around to describe it. Whenever he goes mega, he will have his ultimate and he will be able to throw you against the wall. So you may as well just think of his ultimate's cooldown as his rage bar. The second he's about to go mega, his ultimate's almost up, is essentially how you should be considering this, because I really see no world in which Gnar is going to go mega twice within 30 seconds. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be no point at which Gnar will not have access to his ultimate now, which is a fairly big buff for Gnar. And it's really going to increase his trading potential in lane because he can just kind of cast the ability off cooldown. If he goes Cleaver, which I know a lot of Gnars do, then he really will just be able to throw you against the wall off cooldown. So be very afraid when this guy goes mega from now on out, because that's a very big buff to Gnar. Jin's getting some minor quality of life changes on this patch. His trap duration has been increased to 3 minutes, and he gets more traps faster based on rank of the ability, which doesn't really matter that much because he doesn't max at first, but in the later stages of the game, he will have a lot more traps throwing out on the map because they stay longer and he gets them more frequently. Curtain Call, meanwhile, is getting a minor damage scaling based on the target's missing health, so it will be more effective against low health targets, still just as effective against high health targets though, so minor quality of life buffs to Jin. I don't think it's enough that he's going to just pop back on the meta, but if you're a Jin player, it'll probably feel pretty nice. Kayle is getting some nerfs on this patch, which I think we all know she needed. The problem wasn't that Kayle is a late game champion and would melt your face if she could just hit level 16. The problem with Kayle is that she was too good early. Her laning phase is not weak enough given the late game she has. So Riot are nerfing her base stats in order to really make it so that she suffers in lane. Her base AD and base armor have both been decreased to really make her weaker in lane, and her attack speed ratio has been decreased as well. So again, this is really going to make it so that Kayle is a lot weaker in lane and won't have as much trading potential. Not that she even had that much already. Finally, her Divine Ascent is now based on her level and skill points. So everyone who figured out the Elixir of Skill strat, that doesn't work anymore. She does need to actually be level 11, not just have a second rank in her ultimate in order to hit the ranged form. So that's been removed from the game. Doesn't work anymore, unfortunately. But so Kayle should be a lot weaker in the early game, so you really can double down on punishing her in lane. Moving on, Cain is getting a minor buff to his Shadow Assassin form. Shadow Step, when he has become the Shadow Assassin, is now 8 seconds at all ranks. So Cain will always have access to that signature mobility that he's used to in order to give Shadow Assassin Cain some kind of advantage over Rost, because Rost is just the best form for Cain. It's almost always overshadowing Shadow Assassin. So now this is a little bit more of a trade-off. You get more mobility out of Cain's Shadow Step than you would if you go Rost. Master Yi, very minor. He's just ghosted during Highlander. Doesn't affect him that much, but it is a nice quality of life change. Nautilus is actually getting even more buffs, so I think this champion has potential to come back as either a top lane champion or a support champion, because he's gotten buffs over the last couple of patches, and this is a really big change. The root duration on his passive is now 0.75 at level 1, and it scales up to 1.5 again by level 16. So this is a big change because he's hitting these breakpoints a lot earlier on his stun, and it's just generally better across the board up until level 16. So Nautilus is, I think, going to be a lot stronger for that reason, because he's going to root you for quite a long period of time. And then Dredgeline is getting more damage on top of it as well, especially at rank 1, and better AP ratio. So I think Nautilus is going to be in a really good spot here. Again, I don't know that we'll see him in the jungle, but top lane Nautilus, if tanks are allowed to see play, or support Nautilus, I really think is going to be a thing, because he's gotten a whole bunch of changes. Ornn is, again, getting some minor quality of life buffs. I really think it's just going to continue to make him a solid support lane pick. I don't know that he'll be brought back in the top lane very much, but I do think it makes support Ornn better. He gets more stats out of his unique items. So it's really just power to Ornn himself, because the items they changed are tank items, so Ornn's going to be the one on your team building them more often than not. But it does mean that Ornn is just generally going to be stronger in the late game once he starts getting these items, hits that level 13 points. So should be a nice quality of life change to Ornn. Renekton is actually getting a whole bunch of changes here. Now, Riot, for the most part, are just rounding up abilities that Renekton had that were decimals, but they are always erred on the side of buffing Renekton rather than nerfing him. So his base health is up, his base attack speed growth is up, his armor growth is up, and then all of the healing on Cull the Meek has been increased, up to a 600 empowered healing cap on his Q, which is huge, especially in late game team fights where you can really get onto multiple champions, get that empowered Q, and get a heal off on everybody. You're going to get a ton of HP back. It used to cap at 450, so you're getting another 150 extra points of healing on Renekton. Now, I think this is just generally going to be a huge buff to Renekton, so hopefully he can kind of come back in the meta. It's been a long time since we've seen Renekton, but I think he does have a very interesting place in the game and a very healthy place in the game, so hopefully we can start seeing our favorite Crocodile back in the top lane again. Szechwan is getting buffed on this patch as well. I think she is going to be absolutely nuts. This is the MSI patch, to remind you guys, so I hope you guys are ready for more Szechwan and Gragas, because I think she is going to be all over MSI this year. Her W's first cast damage ratio have been increased by only 0.5% on the first cast, but up to 1.5% on the second cast, which means that she's just going to be dealing so much more damage than she used to. She already got buffs earlier this year that increased her damage again, and the Cinderhulk change, which supposedly happened last patch, only just went through on this patch. There was an issue on Riot's end. Now it is live, which is a buff to Szechwan indirectly. So that hadn't even gone live, and now they're buffing her again. I think she's going to be everywhere. I think she's still in a really strong spot. I think her clear speed after she hits Cinderhulk is going to be absolutely huge. She can really keep pace with all the warrior junglers that are running around the meta right now. I think we're going to see a lot of Szechwan personally, but maybe that's just me. She is still a tank. She is still weak to some of the early invasion champions like Rek'Sai, but in general, I think that this is still going to put Szechwan in a very good spot if you're a Szechwan player. However, to kind of counter that, Trundle got some buffs as well. Maybe Riot realizing we're buffing a lot of tanks. Maybe we should make sure the anti-tank champion is keeping up with them. So Trundle's Chomp bonus damage is up by 20 points at max rank, and his R's cooldown has been decreased by 10 seconds at all ranks, so we'll have access to that a lot more often. Hopefully that should make Trundle feel a little bit better to play, and hopefully this means that if tanks do start running out of control, that Trundle is a viable option. Finally, for champions, Zed is getting nerfed on this patch. Riot are really trying to reduce his burst potential and give his opponents more chances to catch him out if he's playing aggressively in lane. Razor Shuriken's base damage has been decreased by 10 points at all ranks, which is a very big change because that's usually Zed's first max, and because of how Zed's kit works, anytime you nerf his damage, because his kit is all about multiplying the damage he already has, any small nerf is a bigger nerf than it looks like, because that 10 damage off Q means that each shuriken that hits you is doing 10 less damage, which means that the pop from the death mark is doing less damage. So that's actually a pretty substantial nerf to Zed's damage, even though it doesn't look like much. And his W's cooldown has been increased by 2 seconds at its first rank. So that is his last max usually, so that really is going to keep Zed from being able to use it aggressively in lane, because it gives you even more time with which to call your jungler in while his mobility is down and punish him for trying to play aggressively. So Zed should be in a much weaker spot going forward. We're not going to see anybody choosing him or even hovering him in LCS games. Sorry, Jensen, not going to see that champion anymore. Some small nerfs going on to items. Bilgewater Cutlass and Blade of the Ruined King have been very, very good for a marksman because of how cheap it is to get your Cutlass. So are increasing the cost by just a little tiny bit in order to make it more of a trade-off to try and get that item early on. However, Hextech Gunblade has had its its combined cost decreased in order to keep it the same, so it's not affected by this change. Bramblevest got a minor quality of life buff. The Grievous Wound duration is now 3 seconds from 1, so that's why it's just consistent with all of the other Grievous Wound items. Cinderella change, like I mentioned, is finally going in, and Stormrazor is actually getting some changes here, because they're trying to get players to consider Stormrazor for its unique effects instead of just first build it on Kaisa. So now the energized effects are increased by 35%, and it slows the target by 40% for 1.5 seconds now, as opposed to just 1 second. In general, this is just a buff to Kaisa, and she was already, I think, pretty good. I think she was already on the cusp of being a meta champion again. This might be enough to push her over the top because it still gets her to those evolutions very quickly and just gives her better stats across the board now. It will probably be a better item to consider now on some champions, such as Caitlyn in particular. But in general, I think you could just consider this to be a buff to Kaisa. And finally, Coup de Gras is actually being changed. I didn't even know it gave Adaptive Force for 10 seconds after you got a takedown on champion. I had no idea. It didn't matter because I was still taking it for the bonus damage to low health targets, and Riot buffed that bonus damage on this patch. So I think that was a very weird change. They're removing a thing that I didn't even take the rune for and buffing the thing that I did take the rune for. So you're pretty much still going to run Coup de Gras. If you're in Precision Primary, you're pretty much still going to run Coup de Gras across the board because it's just better than the other two options, and Riot made the reason you picked it even better. So I think you're just going to keep taking this rune. Finally, let's talk about the ARAM changes. Now, Riot had a bunch of changes on the live servers over the last couple of weeks, really testing them out and seeing what might stick. So finally, we get the feedback on what we're actually going to have going forward. First and foremost, Mariner's Vengeance and Ghostwalkers are disappearing, where those items will not be returning to the live server, and Backtrack is also being removed, probably to be replaced by Barrier again. So those sort of unique things apparently didn't test well enough, and Riot will be taking them out. However, the Warmog's armor will continue to grant 8 health regen based on missing health rather than max health, so you do still have that as an option to deal with poke, and Riot are keeping the damage reduction on poke damage from far enough away. However, that distance has been increased to 1,000 units rather than 900 units, so hopefully this will make poke champions feel a little bit better about things without making them overbearing yet again. Riot are going to be keeping the 15-minute minion spawn timer increase to really help games end fast. Not sure I like this change. ARAM can already feel very snowbally at the worst of times, and this just helps the snowball even better. But it does make it so that the game will end faster, so you can get more ARAMs in, and especially if you just want to play a quick game of League, this will help that out. And finally, some of the champions will continue to receive balance changes in ARAMs every few months, so Riot are confirming they will be continuing to balance this mode. I would love it if they would do the same thing for Twisted Treeline, but at the very least, we do know that ARAM will be getting some changes, and there are some new nerfs in 9.8 to some of the champions that were too strong, and some minor buffs to some of the champions that were too weak in ARAM, so hopefully that will affect the experience, and let me know what you guys are thinking of any of the ARAM changes that did stick down in the comment section below. Not a big ARAM player, so would love to hear your feedback, especially if you're the kind of person that plays a lot of ARAMs. Anyways, that is it for the highlights on patch 9.8. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Let me know what changes you guys are the most looking forward to down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. And if you're looking for more Grab the Lantern content, you can check out my blog, which is linked down in the description. I upload an article just about each and every single day for your enjoyment. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I will talk to you all later.